Hello, my name is Lisa Weideman. I'm a student at Liberty University pursuing a master's in education. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about emotional intelligence theory. The roots of emotional intelligence theory go back to the 17th century when Baruch Spinoza, who was a Dutch Jewish philosopher, came up with the idea that cognition could best be measured by looking at both emotion and intellect. Before this time, there was a complete split between these concepts, with reason and logic and intellect on one side and emotion on the other side. In 1920, Edward Thorndike, who was an American psychologist, updated Spinoza's idea of emotional intelligence, and he used it in his theory of social intelligence. And Thorndike split social intelligence into emotional intelligence and motivational intelligence. Through the remainder of the 20th century, the idea of emotional intelligence was updated and researched, but it wasn't until 1990 when John D. Mayer, who is currently a professor of psychology at the University of New Hampshire, and excuse me, Peter Salovey, who is the president of Yale University, published a couple of papers on emotional intelligence theory. And in their papers, they came up with a firm definition and a concrete theory of what emotional intelligence is. And in Salovey and Mayer's definition, there are four different parts. This is known as the four-branch categorization of emotional intelligence. So the first branch is the perception of emotion. The second branch is the generation of emotion. The third branch is the understanding of emotion, and the fourth branch is the regulation of emotion. And to go a little more in depth in these areas, the first branch, the excuse me, the perception of emotion, if you have high emotional intelligence in this area, then you're able to accurately perceive emotions of others. To be able to perceive emotions wouldn't do you much good if you weren't able to understand that, yes, that person is feeling fear. Yes, that person is feeling happy. So the second category then is the generation of emotion. And this is the ability in those who have high emotional intelligence to access their emotions and to generate these emotions outwardly for cognition or thought processes. Then the third category, the understanding of emotion, this is in those with high emotional intelligence, is the understanding of emotional thought and the ability to understand emotions of yourself and others and where they come from, why we feel what we do, and how we express these. And then the fourth category is to be able to reflectively regulate our own emotions in order to facilitate the greatest emotional and intellectual health and well-being in our lives. So if the theory of emotional intelligence is true, then those who have a high level of emotional intelligence would experience a high level of emotional and intellectual health, and those with a lower level of emotional intelligence would then experience lower levels of emotional and intellectual health. Bacon and Core, in a 2017 study, Motivating Emotional Intelligence, a Reinforcement Sensitivity Theory Perspective, had the following findings: that emotional intelligence does correspond with pro-social behavior, emotional stability, and social relationships. Now, those three are easy to understand as something that people with high emotional intelligence would have, because they deal with, if you're able to understand other people's emotions and perceive other people's emotions, and then you would be able to think about other people in a way that was pro-social and helpful. And then emotional stability, if you're able to regulate your own emotions in order to have the greatest happiness, then that makes sense as well. But the more surprising finding from Bacon and Core's study was that high emotional intelligence also corresponds with mental health, physical health, academic achievement, and career performance. James Thomas Cannonat, a professor of strategic management, published a study on emotional intelligence and specifically its effect in the workplace. Cannonat, in his 2008 article, Emotional Intelligence, Theory and Description, a Competency Model for Interpersonal Effectiveness, published in Career Development International, published a study of 121 companies around the world that were studied. And what they found is that individuals who had high emotional intelligence had increased work performance and accelerated career paths. They also found that those with high emotional intelligence were 2 times more likely to have accelerated career paths and high job performance than those with high technical or cognitive abilities. So basically this means that emotional intelligence and the ability to understand other people's emotions and regulate your own emotions is more telling in career success than is education or IQ. So another interesting study was looked at the emotional intelligence of children who had been diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome. And there had been a lot of different studies into Asperger's to understand why those children had the social deficits that they did. And with the introduction of emotional intelligence theory, there was a new pathway to discover the whys of the social deficits and if there was something they could do about it. And this study found that that those with Asperger's syndrome had lower levels of trait emotional intelligence than was normal, but that their ability emotional intelligence was average. So trait emotional intelligence has to do with emotional abilities or capabilities. Competencies and characteristics. And this is something that can be improved, while ability emotional intelligence has to do with our emotional abilities and capabilities, the things that we're inborn with, and these things can't be improved. So the implications of the study is that children with Asperger's syndrome will be able to increase their social interactions if they're able to increase trait emotional intelligence. And this also goes hand in hand with Cannonat's study, because Cannonat found that people could be trained to have higher emotional intelligence in trait emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence theory helps to explain why people have different aptitudes and skills in social interactions. It also provides some reasons that those with similar educations and IQs have different success rates in life, and helps to explain different levels of emotional health that people experience. This new theory is exciting, and there are many different ways for it to be expanded and researched. Of course, on the flip side, this is a new theory, and there are still many tests and studies that need to be done to solidify the theory. However, for such a young theory, emotional intelligence theory has been widely accepted, and there's every reason to believe that as research continues, the theory will be refined and validated until emotional intelligence theory is just as accepted and respected as is IQ theory. Thank you.